Hi, this episode of our series may annoy some of you. Why? Well, why don't you watch it and figure it out? I love Star Trek. I love the idea of the United Earth, and even more so of the united in the same goal planets and worlds. Goal of scientific exploration, discovery and learning from one another. It's what I hope for humanity and for all of us. It's also what will most likely never happen, as the current real-life geopolitical situation sadly proves best. We're bound for conflict because we're stupid. I mean, you're not, my dear viewer, but the rest of us, well, we're not the sharpest tool. We're no tool at all. We're as thick as the workbench all of the tools are used on. But whatever, I can dream of peace and unity, same way I dream of winning the lottery, and it too is highly unlikely. Probably even more so, but not impossible. If I was given a choice of picking one of the two and having it come true, genie in a lamp type of a scenario, I wonder what I would have picked. Would it be personal wealth, stability and security, or well-being of all mankind? I'd like to believe that it's the latter, but honestly, I'm not sure. Anyway, I have very mixed feelings about Star Trek Voyager Elite Force, because on one hand, it's an excellent and beautiful game that realistically recreates a lot that we've seen in the show, and on another, it's an FPS chock full of action and shootouts, which are not what the TV series are all about at all. In fact, violence is the tool of last resort in the civilized world of Star Trek, and most often than not used as a means of defense rather than in an aggressive manner. You play as Ensign Alex Munro, one of the few best, smartest and handsomest recruits assigned to Voyager's newly formed Elite Force Hazard team of security personnel. Team created in response to Voyager being suddenly and unexpectedly, and in unexplained circumstances, transported into a graveyard of ships surrounding a singular unknown space station. Your main task, other than being armed to the teeth in phasers and scary frowns, is to figure out what or who stands behind the ship's transportation and how to escape the uncomfortable situation. And while it initially is suggested that the infamous Borg may be behind it, the plot that will unveil along the way may surprise you more than once. You'll spend most of the game in an FPS setting on various different ships and space stations, along with up to 3 of your AI-controlled teammates, getting to the heart of the mystery, one phaser stunt buddy at a time. I originally wanted to say one corpse at the time, because first-person shooter and all, but because of it being Star Trek, I prefer thinking that most enemies are just stunned. Painfully, and with a lesson of not messing up with your Voyager, but only stunned nonetheless. The weapons are a selection of these found in the series and some I've not seen before. It doesn't mean that they haven't appeared on the show, only that my memory sucks, which is nothing new to me really. Anyway, the enemies are considerably varied and can be anything from generic scavengers and other space roughnecks through series staple Klingons and Borg, or even Federation members from the Mirror Universe among others. The one where Federation is completely evil and corrupted. Elite Force is designed to feel like series of episodes of the Voyager rather than levels in a regular shooter, with beginning, middle and end to all of their storylines. And while I appreciate the nod towards the fans of the series' episodic content, it's all a bit too action-packed for me to feel true to its roots. Other than that, it's an excellent shooter, easily one of the best for the year and accompanied by a fantastic plot and stellar presentation. Whether you're a fan of the TV series or not, you should definitely check out Voyager Elite Force, as it's a lot of fun. In fact, it's probably more fun for those who care very little about Star Trek, as they won't notice the philosophical conflict between Star Trek's ideals and the gameplay. Evil Island's Curse of the Lost Soul is a Russian third-person perspective action role-playing. And for a game hardly anyone heard of, as it managed to release under most of our radars, so to speak, it's surprisingly fun and complex. It places you in the shoes of Zach, a boy, or a young man I should say really, who wakes up in an unknown to him location in the middle of ancient and rundown ruins of some old building, not knowing who he is and why he's there at all. In fact, he's no clue where he is either, so it's a mystery of the trifecta kind. What's more interesting even are all the locals who seem to be poor, oppressed and barely surviving, and yet considering completely unknown and alien to them Zach, so you to be their savior. I mean, I know you. So I know you're capable of being one. You saved countless universes, so what's another small world to you? But it's hella disrespectful never even asking for your help and just straight up assuming that you're the one, like Neo in the Matrix, only with better haircut and youthful looks, and that you will save them. We may delve into different what-if scenarios here endlessly, but we all know that in the end you will actually save them all, because you just can't ignore the weak and suffering. But as all true heroes, you're not going to be tackling this huge-ass adventure alone, and will have your trustworthy sidekicks that you'll meet along the way and enroll in your merry team of braves. While there can be 3 active characters in the team at most at any given moment, they can be swapped out, as those that you decided not to add to your current roster don't disappear and just wait patiently to be given a chance to shine. Both you and your companions earn XP, but unlike most other RPGs, Evil Islands doesn't offer a level progression. In fact, there are no levels in the game at all. You divide the experience points you earn for defeating enemies and completing quests between your skills and abilities. And it's worth pointing out here that the jack-of-all-trades approach is not a good choice here, and the master of none will not fare well in Evil Islands. So it's best to specialize yourself and your party members, picking the main route for each of their progressions: magic, archery, thievery or melee combat. You can obviously dip into others to grab some of those extra useful side skills, but keeping a particular single-purpose build in mind for each of the companions will make the game considerably more playable. The enemies are rather varied and can be anything from small bats, frogs, through boars, wolves, wizards, orcs and the likes, all the way to huge lizards, cyclopses, cyclops, no idea what the plural of it is really, and even giant dragons. In fact, many of the battles you may encounter throughout the first half of the game may be impossible to beat. Like, literally impossible. But they're not the stopgaps in your adventure to prevent you from exploration, because many of them can be avoided by crawling or sneaking around them, or even beaten with stealth attacks. You know, there are very few imaginable conflicts that cannot be de-escalated with a powerful backstab. In the end, when all else fails, you can always try to drown the enemies in series of deadly spells, or even the most powerful one in the game, the Save Load spell, which, you know, instantly reverts time to just before you failed. I think what I'm trying to say here is save game. Save it often. While you may initially be no match for many of the baddies head-on, surprise attacks even up the battlefield pretty well. The weapons are aplenty and quite different from one another, and you can find them in drops from defeated enemies, purchase in shops, or craft. I mean, armor and accessories can be crafted too, but I just got carried away with all the weapons. The atmosphere of the gameplay is also excellent and accompanied by impressive for the time presentation. Evil Islands is a true standout title that was unfortunately largely ignored and/or forgotten. Don't make the same mistakes most of us did in 2000. If you like RPGs, give it a chance, it's worth it. Star Trek Starfleet Command Volume 2 Empires at War is the longest titled game in this entire video. Heck, perhaps the entire year, and also a follow-up to the earlier first Starfleet Command. So a Star Trek space combat simulator. The campaign allows you to pick one of many sides of the imaginary conflict, so Klingons, Romulans, Gorns, Myrak, Lyrans, ISC, Orion Syndicate, Hydrans, and of course Federation. And the missions for each of these will be largely the same, with some cosmetic differences. And I say imaginary because some of the scenarios assume conflict between the races that had been in peace for a very long while in the Star Trek lore. Anyway, while the campaign composed out of story and side missions is largely similar, the ships, weapons and tech between all of them isn't. And each race has their own specific ships, armament and tactics. So as you can see, the potential for interesting encounters is definitely present in the game, and also its strongest point. What you won't find in Starfleet Command 2 is personal drama, hollow room stories, away missions or interesting technical or scientific problems to solve, none of that. The game is about combat and combat alone, which is fine for the most part, but once again, it's totally not what the Star Trek is all about. Sure, there are battles in it, some even gigantic, involving dozens if not hundreds of ships, but at its heart, it's a TV series about exploration, understanding and bettering oneself. Well, whatever. How's the combat, since there's nothing else here really? It's good. Very good, actually. In fact, it defends the entire game from being judged as not really Star Trek because of how Star Trek it makes it feel. I know, I'm kinda contradicting myself here, but you gotta play it to understand it. It ignores the spirit of Star Trek while retaining all of its mechanics. Anyway, there's a lot to keep an eye on during battles, from how many missiles and / proton torpedoes you have left, through how well your shield is holding, and you gotta manage it all in real time, during combat, feeling like a true starship captain. So it's not rare that you'll be maneuvering your ship in a way to get hit, yes, get hit, and not to avoid it, in the side where your shields are the strongest, so that you could then lay the destruction to that enemy with a barrage of your own phaser blasts and missiles. Some battles are lost from the start. So if you feel that you can't take a particular enemy and see no tactical way of doing so, and also it's not a story mission, then perhaps it's best not to take part in it at all. Anyway, you can control up to 3 ships of varying size and weaponry at the same time, well, if you have them, that is. You can attack enemy ship specific components provided their shields are down, and you can even try to board and capture these ships. There's a lot to do and consider in Starfleet Command 2, and as a captain, it all falls down to you. So, this balancing act of keeping the shield strong, weapons loaded and firing, and even shuttles disrupting or attacking the enemy forces to give you a few seconds of a breather to regroup and jump back into combat is what you'll be doing. And it's hella fun. But what it also is overcomplicated. While the interfaces for all the races are rather clean and easy to grasp, the sheer number of things you must keep in mind and interact with at all times, especially when fighting bigger, stronger or more numerous enemies, can give you a headache. And not of the good kind. A little bit of automation, some kind of an AI assistant that could be given some tasks while you focus on the grand tactics could be of huge help and make this good game great. It's not the case though. So while Starfleet Command is fantastic, it's only that to those who are willing to invest time and energy into learning, memorizing and mastering this beast of a game. And sadly, I believe that most aren't. Starwise's Interstellar Consortium have arrived in the known universe and are hoping to pacify other races with their sheer power. You playing as your chosen one have to stand against them. It's perhaps not the deepest of plots, but it's plenty enough to serve as a background to a combat-centric title. Especially one that serves tons upon tons of different ships for you to acquire, arm and use throughout its campaign. If you're a fan of Star Trek and tactical combat simulators, this one's a must-play. In any other case, approach it at your own discretion. Talking about space combat, Tachyon the Fringe is a first-person perspective space combat game, but we'll get to that in a minute. You're Jake Logan, and no, not of the infamous YouTube Logans, and you're a master spaceship pilot. You're so good in fact that you may be one of the few best pilots in the entire galaxy. I mean, there's you, but that's a given, then there's Han Solo from the Star Wars, and maybe, just maybe, Tom Paris from the Voyager, the three best of the best. Anyway, you work for the advanced Ganymede Technologies and fly their ships for the ungodly amounts of money, like more per one flight than some others earn in a year or two. You've so much money in fact that you have apartments on most local space stations, and most of them in the good parts of those stations. But for us to have a game, something had to change in this idle life of yours. And in this particular case, on one of the basic missions you were on, something went wrong and a huge-ass explosion killed several civilians. Somehow you've been involved and blamed for it, so now as the game starts, in the fringes outside of the main Sol system, you survive as an exile, working for anyone willing to pay you. In the land, in the space sectors no less, governed by no laws and constantly contended by rivaling megacorporations. And this is where the game starts. Tachyon the Fringe is composed out of over 60 individual handcrafted and scripted missions, making it one of the best playing flight combat simulations ever made. And yes, I did not use the word space here for a reason. I think it's one of the best in the entire genre and not only limited to the stellar kind. Each of the missions have their own unique objectives and background and delivers a unique experience. Some of them will push your personal story of figuring out who framed you forward, while others will serve as an interesting side activities for credits and ranks that then can be used to get better ships and equipment. All of them, however, have a purpose and are not a generic go and kill X number of enemies or escort Y or whatever. In fact, other than not being able to free flight in the space outside of the missions, I'd say that Tachyon is the best Frontier contender ever since the OG Frontier and until Freelancer. It's naturally smaller in scope than these two and has a true story to follow unlike Frontier, but it's just fantastic the way it is. Tachyon's presentation is pretty good too, not lacking in detail or atmospheric sounds, but it's nowhere near the best in the genre. It's clear that the focus was placed on gameplay and design, and that's where it shines, serving as a beacon of amazing in the vast empty vacuum of space full of mediocre games. Make sure to check it out. Have you ever wondered about Genesis and true meaning of Kaplar, or how the blood wine really tastes like? Or how Klingons, while moving as if they were standing in a mat with their hands tied, are considered some of the fiercest and most dangerous warriors in the galaxy? Well, wonder no more. Star Trek Klingon Academy answers those and many more other questions too. Only not really, but it felt like a good jump-off point. Klingon Academy is a successor to earlier Starfleet Academy and places you in the shoes of a glory-hungry young Klingon officer, Torlek, studying in the Klingon Command Academy to become the best of the Empire's ship captains. The game is set 2 years before the truce between the Federation and Klingon Empire, and you're studying directly under famous General Chang, known for his numerous conquers and his mouth-watering beef stir-fry. He will send you on a simulated campaign against the Federation, focusing on final decisive assault on them. Klingons are honorable fighters, honorable to fault at that, as they can't ever see past that blinding honor, to focus on logic, and that's pretty well telegraphed in the game too. Because simulation or not, if you fail a mission, you're dismissed from the Academy. What's more, you're relegated to be the Academy's toilet cleaner, and not just a regular toilet cleaner mind you, but one for the teachers. And you can only imagine how much blood wine they drink throughout the day. It's not fun. There are tons of missions you'll get to partake in following this training campaign, and along them you'll get to see and often battle over 40 different ships belonging to various Star Trek species. What's more, if you're lucky, you'll get to destroy the series staple, USS Enterprise, which is just all kinds of confusing to me. I mean, destroying the flagship is hell of an achievement, no doubt about that, but on the other hand, no one wants to see it happen. Well, other than the Klingons before the truce, Romulans on any odd day of the week, and Borg. But only because it's not in one of the most fun shapes of round or square. You can visit different parts of the ships you'll control too, so sickbase, engineering, comms and the likes, and can even board the enemy vessels if their shields are down. It's all really fun if you're into Star Trek. Graphics and sounds are nice, though nothing to write home about really, but they are all in lore, so you'll appreciate them nonetheless. And the extra 90-ish minutes of video footage with actors from the series will serve as an extra cherry on this already sweet pie of a game. I wouldn't say that Klingon Academy will teach you how to be a real Klingon, for that you'd need to be truly effed in the head, but it will no doubt show you Star Trek space from their twisted, honor-based perspective. If you're a fan of the series, chances are you'll love it, and if you're not, check it out anyway, as it may be weird enough for you to enjoy. Paradox are well known for their obscenely deep, demanding and complicated strategies, and 2000's Europa Universalis, a precursor to the entire series, and also Hearts of Iron and Crusader Kings, is not an exception. I mean, they've released other games too, but these are the three I think of when I imagine very complex and rewarding global strategies that are more thorough in their approach to details than basically anything else on the market. They're known for being some of the most difficult and demanding games to get into, with an incredibly high entry point requiring you to focus on dozens of things at once and think in multitasking manner. But in the same time, if you manage to do so, if you cross that sky-high threshold, they're some of the best gaming experiences one can ever have. Mind you, being mainly a strategy and role-playing gamer myself, I still find all of this ungodly demanding. Especially that I'm a free mind and it's not easy for me to focus on one thing, let alone a number of them at the same time, and then keep all of them in mind and how they now and in the future will correlate and influence one another. It may seem like I'm talking just for the sake of talking here, but if you ever played any of these, you know exactly what I mean by all that blabber. Anyway, Europa Universalis lets you control one of a variety of European powers during the age of colonization and conquest, and you'll have all the tools in the world at your disposal for your chosen nation to come on top. So you can engage in deep diplomacy full of alliances, deals, bribes, backstabbings and betrayals. You can partake in small skirmishes as well as in massive world-spanning multi-front wars, which funny enough, if you're good enough of a player, you could have started yourself for one reason or another. You can discover, explore and colonize new lands, and generally speaking play the best grand strategy of 2000. Yes, not one of, but the best. What's more, each of the countries that you can play as are not just reskins of one another, but all work entirely different and have their own beliefs, customs and values. All of the decisions that you'll make, be it military, diplomatic and financial, will not only influence your country and your closest competitors, but can change the history of the game's entire world. And hardly any title up to that point in history of gaming was as overflowing with detail and possibilities. Especially that the start-off point in terms of land division, military strength and diplomatic relations between all 8 major nations is a nearly one-to-one carbon copy of what it really was in 1492 in our history. And you get to rewrite it as you see fit. Or as you manage to, cause you know, the entry point and learning curve of this one is atrocious to say the least. Europa Universalis is at the same time a micromanagement heaven as it is a micromanagement hell. There's so much stuff to do, check, modify, plan, strategize and follow. It's easy to get lost, and it's also so overwhelming that many potential gamers may just bounce off of it, even if they play strategies exclusively. It's a game like no other, in terms of everything, good or bad. Check it out, but make sure to be mentally prepared as it may break you. Star Trek Deep Space Nine The Fallen is one of the most Star Trek-feeling Star Trek games to date. I know what you're thinking, grammar gods have abandoned me, but it was the best way I could explain myself here. Well, the best way I know of. Point is that many Star Trek games use the setting and stories but don't feel Star Trek, by either contradicting its guiding principles or straying from the lore it is based on. This one's not like that at all. It takes place roughly around the end of the 6th season of the TV series and requires you to have at the very least basic knowledge of it, or preferably a deeper understanding of the religious and political situation of it all. You play as Sisko, Kira and Worf and clearly represent the Federation in the story. Story that will have you discover the mysteries and true power of the 3 missing red orbs of Jalbador, chasing them through space and time. For all intents and purposes, The Fallen is a third-person action adventure, not unlike more famous Tomb Raider, and also focusing on puzzling, exploration and in parts combat too. The Unreal Engine used to power it all makes the Fallen look fantastic for the time it released in and recreate many of the series' staple locations in unprecedented detail. I mean, even the teacher at Deep Space Nine station is included, and that one's not an easy thing to replicate. The levels are huge, open, offering a lot of verticality and full of interesting unique locations and puzzles. So you'll not only visit the aforementioned space station, but also Planet Voyager, the Defiant, Dominion Prison, Underground Temple, Sunken Starship, among others. Many of the puzzles are solved with an always helpful tricorder, an iconic scientific Star Trek tool. Most missions have you seek out particular objects and then deliver them to specific locations where they are used, or to certain characters. The story enveloping it all is excellent and very TV feeling for the lack of a better word, and also a blast to follow. Well, short of some annoying backtracking sections which sadly happen more than once throughout it. The Fallen is probably the most Star Trek-like game from this entire video, as it focuses mostly on, let's say, away missions part of the series and a lot of exploration and puzzling, with combat taking a definite backseat. If you're into the series at all, this one's a no-brainer and should be the first game from this video that you'll try out. Happyland Adventures is a cutesy fantasy side-scrolling platformer in which you play as a small dog that has to gather and save all the lost colorful animals and then lead them to the so-called happy zones. Animal haven gateways perhaps, or the farm that so many of us were told about when our pets passed away. Neither, I think, as the animals seem to be in a tip-top shape when they get there, so maybe a kennel, whatever. Once you manage to save enough of them and deliver to those happy zones, you're free to move to the next stage. Not many people know this, but this little gem of a game was created as a freeware entry for the GameDevNet contest, and then easily won it. Unsurprisingly so, as behind the over-the-top sweet graphics lies a hell of a game, something that many would willingly pay for given its quality. There are obviously numerous pickups other than the animals that supplement your score and enable extra abilities for our little dog, and what feels like hundreds of hidden locations full of gems and fruit to gather. The final version of the game included earlier standalone Xmas expansion and the level editor, addition of which spawned numerous user-created levels that extended the life of this amazing platformer considerably. My first experience with Happyland Adventures was when I was at uni studying to become IT technician/teacher, believe it or not, and I had to spend some time teaching IT in primary and secondary schools to gain extra credit and necessary experience. And I happened to end up in the school that my youngest sister was a student of. Well, I aimed to get there. Chances were slim, but stars aligned correctly, no war started that year, which may be a surprise to everyone these days, and I landed where I was supposed to. And everyone in her class played Happyland every second they got free as if they were possessed by it. At first I disregarded it as a game for kids. After all, it was not played from the first-person perspective, there were no guns and no cities or nations to manage within it whatsoever, so it was definitely not a title for me. Or so I thought. But then I gave it a go one of those days and I was instantly hooked. It's easily one of the best late classic PC platformers, and one you should do yourself a favor and try out. And no, I'm not a teacher anymore. Star Trek Armada is my personal least favorite Star Trek game from this entire video. And no, not because it's bad or the worst of them all, not the case here whatsoever. It's an RTS, so a genre I dabble in very little and only from time to time. So, if you're a fan of all things real-time and strategic, carry on watching, you may actually love it. Armada is set in the late 24th century, sometime after the Dominion War. The game setting sees Klingons involved in heavy infighting for power, Romulan covert intelligence agency Tal Shiar discovering a very dangerous secret potentially capable of tipping the balance of power in the universe, and Captain Jean-Luc Picard meeting with the time-traveling Federation ship and being warned of an imminent Borg invasion. I know, a lot happening all at once, but that's what Star Trek is all about. The game is composed out of 4 mainline campaigns, one for each side of Federation, Klingon, Romulan and Borg, and a hidden smaller, 5th epilogue campaign. Each of the species plays entirely different, has their own kinds of ships and armament, and even unique super powerful weapons. Their distinctive features have also been translated into video game format successfully, so Federation is the most rounded up race with good defensive and offensive capabilities, Klingons are very strong attackers but lack a bit in defense, Romulans have cloaks on most ships, and Borg, well, the resistance is futile, you will be assimilated. It has a nice ring to it. Some of the current world tyrants should use it as a slogan, really. Anyway, most ships have 2 HP bars, and when the shields are down, you can transport units to the enemy ships to battle their crew inside, and if successful, take over those ships, which you know is very lore appropriate. Number of crew members on the ships also dictate how fast they shoot and their self-repair rate. If any of the ships or stations have their entire crew killed and/or removed and are unmanned, they are considered derelict and are uncontrollable until crewed again or destroyed. Each unit, so a ship or station, has 5 systems: shield generator, engines, life support, sensors and weapons, and these can be damaged in combat too and take time to repair. Other Star Trek factions are present throughout the campaigns too, but only play minor roles in them, so you may end up seeing an odd Ferengi here and there, which you know, is always fun, rules of acquisition and all. Famous from the TV series characters and ships will play their role in gameplay too, often key roles no less, and they're usually much stronger and better performing than your base set. While space can be considered a big bucket of empty, Star Trek taught us over its numerous different series and movies that it's not the case whatsoever, so all kinds of nebulas, wormholes, asteroid fields or black holes will be present and even take active part in your combat strategies. Well, active as in you'll use them to your advantage and not as autonomous units. All in all, if not for the RTS part of it, I would have loved Armada. It's a well-rounded, unique and fun game in the universe of Star Trek, and one that gives its strategic combat side justice. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is a third-person action adventure in the ultra-popular and called by today's series, spanning numerous mainline entry games, spin-offs, movies and even TV series. Also, a whole world of toys and subjects for the cosplayers to cover. Nemesis takes place during the events of Resident Evil 2 and sees you playing as a series, style and beauty icon, Miss Jill Valentine. So you'll need to help Jill escape overrun by the undead town of Raccoon City. T-Virus zombies, however, are the least of Jill's problems, as the teacher Nemesis is on her track and will stop at nothing to get her. Nemesis saw an ultra-powerful and nigh indestructible bioweapon. Umbrella Corporation sure knew where to invest their money in research, you gotta admit that. And the best thing about it is that they never stopped. I mean, we have by now like, what, 200, 300 Resident Evil games, and we still battle the Umbrella or the corrupted mutants. Same as in earlier entries in the series, all the graphics are made out of pre-rendered backgrounds with 3D real-time rendered objects and characters overlaid on them. I've been very vocal about it in the past, but I will gladly repeat myself here. I hate this kind of a solution in my video games as it makes them look terrible in my opinion, and also more often than not, especially at certain angles, camera controls leave a lot to be desired. Fortunately, it's not the worst here, and it's just the aesthetics that annoy me a little about it. I'm in the vocal minority though, so it may be something you won't even notice while playing. Unlike previous entries, however, Jill can now instantly spin by 180 degrees, dodge to avoid attacks and create different kinds of ammunition, each working better against a particular kind of an enemy. Location of some key items is randomized too, which adds a lot to the replayability of Resident Evil 3. And while I won't be replaying it anytime soon myself, I know that for many of you it's a cult classic and a game worth many playthroughs. 5 Star Trek games in one video. All the Trekkies are happy, and everyone else is a bit pissed that the spots could have been taken by other games. Well, for one, I love Star Trek, so there was no way I would ignore them, and for two, there's not that many noteworthy games left for 2000. So, let me know if you're in the disappointment camp or in the yay Star Trek one. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and maybe share it too, it helps more than you know. If you didn't, then don't naturally. It was fun talking to you as usual, and I'll see you, or more accurately, talk to you very soon.